إن الحمد لله نحمده ونستعينه ونستغفره ونعوذ بالله من شرور أنفسنا ومن سيئات أعمالنا. من يهده الله فلا مضل له ومن يضلل فلا هادي له. وأشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وحده لا شريك له. وأشهد أن محمدًا عبده ورسوله. يا أيها الذين آمنوا اتقوا الله حق تقاته ولا تموتن إلا وأنتم مسلمون. أما بعد فإن أصدق الحديث كتاب الله وخير الهدي هدي محمد صلى الله تعالى عليه وآله وصحبه وسلم. وشر الأمور محدثاتها وكل محدثة بدعة وكل بدعة ضلالة وكل ضلالة في النار. ثم أما بعد. From the greatness and the might of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is that He alters the day with the night and the night of the day. And that He subhanahu wa ta'ala changes seasons from seasons and shows mankind the greatness of Allah Jalla wa Ala through His creation. However, every single moment and every single time and every single season, whilst there lies ibadat, actions of worship, whereby mankind can come close to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in the night or in the day, in the spring or in the summer or in the autumn or the winter, there also lies, by the permission of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, temptations, trials and tribulations, for mankind to fall, for mankind to be promised a wrath from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, for mankind to err and to make mistakes. There are certain sins that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala warns the slaves from that can only be committed during certain seasons or certain times. However, there are certain sins that are present throughout every single time and every single moment, in particular and especially in the summer. Sins that are predominantly found where mankind are extremely trialed and perhaps on the verge of committing them during the heat of the summer, during the sun, during the light of the summer. And this sin we're going to speak about today, inshaAllah ta'ala, is the sin of allowing the gazes to wander, is the sin of looking upon the awrah, looking upon the private parts of the opposite gender, looking upon a sight that Allah Jalla wa Ala has made unlawful for us. But before that, we need to understand that nearly every single sin, in fact every single sin, originates and can only be done through a blessing that Allah Jalla wa Ala has blessed you with. For allowing the gazes to wander and looking upon something that is unlawful is a sin that is committed, a crime against Allah, done through a blessing that Allah Jalla wa Ala has given you. The blessing of being able to see in the very first place. Vision, to which Allah Jalla wa Ala says, أَفَلَا يَنْظُرُونَ إِلَى الْإِبِلِ كَيْفَ خُلِقَتْ وَإِلَى السَّمَاءِ كَيْفَ رُفِعَتْ وَإِلَى الْجِبَالِ كَيْفَ نُصِبَتْ وَإِلَى الْأَرْضِ كَيْفَ سُطِحَتْ. أَفَلَا يَنْظُرُونَ. Do you not see? Do you not look towards how Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has created the camel? Do you not look towards how Allah Jalla wa Ala has raised the heavens? Do you not see how Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has made the mountains as pegs, mountains that control the earth? And how He has made the earth flat for us to walk upon, widespread for us to walk upon. The sins, they originate from blessings. In fact, blessings which the default position is to worship Allah by. The eyes are used, its default position, its essence, its reason, its purpose for Allah giving us eyes and created us with them is to use them to ponder about the greatness of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. to ponder about the greatness of Allah Jalla wa Ala. Eyes used to see the fruits of Allah, to see the bounties of Allah, to see the signs of Allah Jalla wa Ala's anger, yes, might, yes, His reward and punishment at the same time. Does He not say subhanahu wa ta'ala, يَا أَيُّهَا النَّاسُ اتَّقُوا رَبَّكُمْ إِنَّ زَلْزَلَةَ السَّاعَةِ شَيْءٌ عَظِيمٌ. And then He says, يَوْمَ تَرَوْنَهَا. Does He not say subhanahu wa ta'ala, O mankind, fear Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala your Lord. Indeed the Shaykh of the day of judgment, the mighty Shaykh, is a shay'un azim, a mighty thing. يَوْمَ تَرَوْنَهَا. You will see it. You will see it, He says subhanahu wa ta'ala. Like He says, أَلْهَاكُمُ التَّكَاثُرُ حَتَّى زُرْتُمُ الْمَقَابِرَ كَلَّا سَوْفَ تَعْلَمُونَ ثُمَّ كَلَّا سَوْفَ تَعْلَمُونَ كَلَّا لَوْ تَعْلَمُونَ عِلْمَ الْيَقِينِ لَتَرَوُنَّ الْجَحِيمَ. You're going to see the fire once more. You will see the bounties of Allah. You will see the punishments of Allah. The eyes are used to. The purpose is to remind you about Allah, His might, His strength, His power, His blessings, His level subhanahu wa ta'ala. The greatness of Allah can be understood by pondering, by looking with your eyes. But when the eyes are used, when a person's gazes are used to seek the wrath of Allah Jalla wa Ala, then the entire dimensions of how Allah Jalla wa Ala treats His slave will change forever. Oh brothers in Islam, Imam Ibn Kathir, rahimahullah ta'ala, he mentions the story in Bidayah and Nihayah. The story of a shab, the story of a young adult who was known to be amongst his companions as the greatest reciter of Quran, the most knowledgeable amongst them. Wherever they would go, they would seek his consultation. They would ask him for his advice. They would advise him, they would ask him to lead them in salah. He was the person that was known as أفقى الناس عندهم, the most knowledgeable of people amongst them, and the most fluent in Quran amongst them. They traveled secretly on a mission to Rome. They traveled secretly on a mission to Rome. Ibn Kathir writes, and he says, rahimahullah ta'ala, that as the companions were getting ready for salah, and they were washing themselves, making wudu, they saw this imam amongst them, they saw this righteous man amongst them, wandering next to a fortress of the Romans. So they thought to themselves, perhaps he's going to do something, perhaps he's pondering about the greatness of Allah Jalla wa Ala. They looked towards what he was doing, and they saw him speaking to a woman. They saw him speaking to a woman. They inquired, what are you doing, O righteous man? What are you doing, O Imam? He said that he has met this woman, he saw this woman as he was traveling. And his gazes were unable to avert himself. He was unable to avert his gazes. He kept looking at her until her face and her beauty became a source of desire and temptation and lust for him. He went and he approached her. And he said to her, what is your mahar? How can I take you? How can I marry you? She said to him, you can marry me on the condition that you leave Islam and you become a Christian. He said to his companions, the same companions that were on this battle, this expedition of war, this expedition of reward, expedition of glory. He said to them, wallahi, today I'll become a Christian to marry her. They said to him, but haven't you memorized Quran? Haven't you memorized ahadith? Weren't you not our teacher? Weren't you not somebody that called us towards good? He said to them, replying, saying, I've forgotten the Quran entirely at this moment of him becoming a Christian. Except one verse, and he recited the verse. And he said, رُبَمَا يَوَدُّ الَّذِينَ كَفَرُوا لَوْ كَانُوا مُسْلِمِينَ ذَرْهُمْ يَأْكُلُوا وَيَتَمَتَّعُوا وَيُلْهِهِمُ الْأَمَلُ فَسَوْفَ يَعْلَمُونَ. Don't the disbelievers want to become Muslims? Don't they want to become Muslims? But their food and their temptations and their desires are things that distract them continuously. The only ayah of the Quran he had memorized or that he had remembered after him becoming a Christian was this ayah. was this ayah. And due to stories like these, and there are many stories like this, Ibn Kathir, rahimahullah ta'ala, mentions another story of a mu'adhin. And this mu'adhin would climb the pulpit. And every day he would call the adhan, but the people would tell him, make sure you don't open your eyes as you call the adhan, for he'd be able to see into the area, the villages of the Christians and the Jews. One day he opened his eyes and he said, Hayya ala salah. He saw a very beautiful woman. And his adhan stopped at that moment. He left his position, he ran towards the woman. He left his deen. He left his religion. He left everything that Allah Jalla wa Ala gave him because of his gaze. Because of his gaze. Hence Allah Jalla wa Ala commands. And He commands the believing men and the believing women, قُلْ لِلْمُؤْمِنِينَ يَغُضُّوا مِنْ أَبْصَارِهِمْ وَيَحْفَظُوا فُرُوجَهُمْ ذَلِكَ أَزْكَى لَهُمْ إِنَّ اللَّهَ خَبِيرٌ بِمَا يَصْنَعُونَ. He said, tell the believing men, يَغُضُّوا مِنْ أَبْصَارِهِمْ, lower your gazes. Make sure you control them. Make sure you do not allow your gazes to set on the side that is on the awrah of those that are haram for you. ذَلِكَ أَزْكَى لَهُمْ. This is something that is more purified, more better for you. إِنَّ اللَّهَ خَبِيرٌ بِمَا يَصْنَعُونَ. Allah Jalla wa Ala knows what He has created subhanahu wa ta'ala. Hence the Prophet sallallahu alayhi wa sallam said, إِنَّ اللَّهَ كَتَبَ عَلَى ابْنِ آدَمَ حَظَّهُ مِنَ الزِّنَا. Indeed Allah Jalla wa Ala has written for the slaves of Allah, the children of Adam, a portion of zina for them. A portion of illegal sexual intimacy for them. He said sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, أَدْرَكَ ذَلِكَ لَا مَحَالَ. فزنا العين النظر والزنا اللسان المنطق والنفس تمنى وتشتهي والفرج يصدق ذلك كله ويكذبه. He says sallallahu alayhi wa sallam in a hadith reported in Bukhari and Muslim that every person has a share of zina with them. The zina of the eyes is looking upon something that is unlawful. The zina of the tongue is speech that is unlawful. The soul then wishes and hopes, and the private parts then fulfills and acts upon what it did previously or what it did prior to that. Hence Ibn al-Qayyim rahimahullah ta'ala said, the zina does not begin except the eyes meet. Then the mouth will smile. Then the speech. Then touching. Then meeting. And doing something unlawful. It begins, it originates, it starts, it initiates from looking upon something that is haram. It begins and it initiates from looking upon something that is haram. And we can all testify, our brothers in Islam, that during this last week or 2 weeks, where we felt this summer heat, and we found out across the streets or in the parks, or even in our workplaces or in our schools or places of education, that during these hours, during this season, during this temperature, the shaitan, he calls upon the disbelieving women and even the believing women to become more loose in their garments, such that they wear hardly anything if they wear anything. And this season becomes a season of temptation. A season where the shaitan uses the environment around him and the opportunity around him to make it such that we all fall into some kind of zina. No, our brothers in Islam. As Imam Ibn Sirin rahimahullah ta'ala said, he said, Wallahi fa wallahi, I swear by Allah, and then I swear by Allah, the only woman that I've ever looked upon with desire and lust is my wife, and no one other than that. Some of the scholars of the past, they used to write in their stories, and one of them used to say that he had a daughter, and he said, whilst I love her more than anything, she didn't possess much beauty. Until one day a pious, righteous man, he married her, and he took great care of her. He took great care of her. And he would write poetry over and over again, speaking about the immense beauty that my daughter possessed. But I always wondered, whilst I love her, whilst she means absolutely absolutely everything to me. She doesn't have this beauty. Who is he speaking about? So I inquired, asking him one day, who is this person that you write about? Because I fear it is not my daughter. And he said, Wallahi, I am only writing about your daughter. She is the most beautiful woman to me because my gazes have never seen another woman. And thus he had no one to compare his wife to. And we look towards our marriages today, we look towards the relationship people have with their wives today. The reason why we have the highest rate of divorces across the world, the lands of Islam, the lands of Kufr, is because Muslims, non-Muslims, begin comparing their wives to what they see on the streets, what they see on TV, what they see in billboards, what they see in magazines. Our women, if we protect our gazes, and we look after them, and we only ever look towards them, we become, by the permission and mercy of Allah, the most beautiful people to us. And we can protect ourselves from zina, and protect our hearts from wandering, and our gazes from wandering, if we look back to the original cause for every single haram, and that is none other than protecting our gazes. أقول قولي هذا واستغفر الله لي ولكم ولسائر المسلمين فاستغفروا إن الله تعالى غفور رحيم. بسم الله والحمد لله والصلاة والسلام على رسول الله وعلى آله وصحبه ومن والاه وبعد. One of the most common causes whereby mankind, in particular the male slaves of Allah and now even the female slaves of Allah, they fall victim to the temptations of shaitan, is watching illicit and forbidden images or videos on their phones, on their laptops, or in other occasions. We should know, our brothers in Islam, that Allah Jalla wa Ala says, يَعْلَمُ خَائِنَةَ الْأَعْيُنِ وَمَا تُخْفِي الصُّدُورِ, that He knows everything about us Jalla wa Ala, every single thing that we see, everything that is hidden in our chests. He understands and He knows subhanahu wa ta'ala better than we do. One of the greatest temptations that we find in today's day and age is that mankind have stumbled and fallen into a trap of watching illicit images and illicit videos. In fact, perhaps if you don't already know, then you will come to know now that in your schools or in the schools of your children, the teachers themselves, they encourage their children to watch these images. In fact, only last week I was holding a class in our weekend school. I was speaking about Islamic social studies, talking about this topic of pornography. And I was discussing this topic to kids between the ages or between the years of year 7 and year 10. And whilst we were speaking about the different levels, the different types, and how Allah Jalla wa Ala has made it haram and why He has made it haram, every single one of them vouched and told me that their teachers in year 7 encouraged them to explore this category by watching different genres of this pornography when they are alone. They encouraged them. In fact, I was so surprised that a child at the age of year 7 was mentioning things to me and genres about this haram that I had yet heard of. And the reality of today's day and age, our brothers and sisters in Islam, is that the children of Adam have with them wherever they go a means to commit the greatest sins from the category of your desires and the greatest sins from the category of aqeedah, of doubts. Wherever they go, even if they were to sit in front of the Kaaba, the house of Allah, they have with them in their pockets a tool that can take them away directly away from Islam entirely. And this is none other than the phones that we carry. And this is none other than the phone that our children carry. For we are a testimony against ourselves. How many a time are we trying to watch something halal and pure, but we find a pop-up that comes that is unlawful? How many times have we pondered, and we are people of taqwa, we try to be people of taqwa, people that come to pray in the salah in the masjid, people that have some kind of life experience and general know-how as to how the shaitan traps and overcomes the slaves of Allah. But yet still to us, we see these moments of temptations and trial. Imagine our children. Little life experience they have, little know-how they have. But once they have been given a tool to which the shaitan can use to overcome the slaves of Allah, by what? By the gaze. And this is how it all begins. By the gaze. By that first gaze. That first gaze will imprint in your hearts an image, a picture to which the shaitan will call over and over again. The first gaze to which Allah commands us to know. The first gaze to which the Prophet ﷺ ascribed towards zina. In fact, Shaykh Khalid al-Sabt, and I'll end with this story inshallah ta'ala. Shaykh Khalid al-Sabt, he told some of the brothers in Medina a very powerful story. He said as he was a qadi in one of the courts in Saudi, some of the parents of a righteous, pious hafidha of Quran, a memorizer of Quran, a woman, a girl, they came to him to complain about the situation of their daughter. And they said to him, whilst affirming she's pious, she's righteous, and she feared Allah, and she memorized the entire Quran, and she was like the cream of the entire generation. They were confused as to why she decided that she wanted to be the fourth wife of a man that had no deen in him at all. A man that had no religion in him at all. A man that asked of her that when she married him, she does not practice Islam in front of him. She does not wear the hijab. She does not pray the salah in front of him. Yet she agreed to this marriage. So they were confused. Perhaps they suggested, perhaps she was blackmailed. Perhaps she was, black magic was done upon her. They were confused about the situation. Shaykh Khalid al-Sabt, he asked for a meeting with the girl. And in this meeting she confessed. And she said to him that all she did was fast in the day and pray in the night. And fast in the day and pray in the night. But this ibadah was done as a tawbah, as a means of asking Allah's forgiveness for what? Because during the day as she fasted and during the night as she prayed, all she did was she watched pornography over and over again. She was trapped in this sin that she couldn't get out. So she said to herself, why am I living this fake life of Islam? Let me live a real life that I actually am living. Let me marry someone upon haram and live a life upon haram like how I live my life currently. Oh brothers in Islam, pornography is amongst the most addictive forms of drugs. Looking upon something unlawful is amongst the most addictive form of drugs. More addictive, as some of the people they mentioned, more addictive than any drug that you often find. But when our children are exposed to it, and when we set an example by looking towards things that are haram and not changing the channel, when these illicit images come up on our TVs, they subliminally follow our examples. They will subliminally follow our examples. And thus da'wah, thus change becomes and starts with me and you. Change starts with me and you. When our children see us automatically looking away or lowering our gazes as we speak to the opposite gender, or even lowering our gazes as we watch television, this will place and imprint in their hearts a light of Islam. This will imprint in their hearts the light of lowering the gazes for haram and ma'asi begins by looking at it. Haram and ma'asi and all types of sin begin by looking at it. We ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to protect our gazes. We ask Him subhanahu wa ta'ala to protect our gazes from every single sin. We ask Him Jalla wa ala to protect the gazes of our children. We ask Him subhanahu wa ta'ala to protect us from all of the forms and shades of zina. We ask Him subhanahu wa ta'ala to purify our hearts and to remove from it all types of imprinted haram forms. We ask Him Jalla wa ala to grant Islam and Muslims victory across the earth. Allahumma salli ala Muhammad وعلى آل محمد كما صليت على إبراهيم وعلى آل إبراهيم إنك حميد مجيد. اللهم بارك على محمد وعلى آل محمد كما باركت على إبراهيم وعلى آل إبراهيم إنك حميد مجيد. وصلى الله وسلم على نبينا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين. قوموا بالصلاة.